Our celebrated guests today are artist Robert Rauschenberg and his dealer, Leo Castelli.
Dealer? Friend.
Friend and dealer.
No, friend.
It's doubtful if the art of the 60s would have looked quite the way it did if Leo Castelli had not assembled his group of artists and promoted them into international prominence since he first opened his gallery 20 years ago. At just about the same time, actually 6 years earlier, Robert Rauschenberg popped into American art with his first one-man show, what was then called an eccentric and prophetic show of pictures. You had only recently arrived in New York. How did you get a show at Betty Parsons' gallery?
Well, there were so many things that were going on there that, I was a student. I don't know how sophisticated you are, but I wasn't so sophisticated. And there were so many things I didn't understand. I kept going back to the Betty Parsons gallery for, not so much for answers as for questions. And finally, I just took a bunch of paintings up there, and because I'd reached a very serious impasse, and I just took a bunch of paintings with me and went up there and asked if I could see her. And she came out and said, "I only look at paintings on Tuesday." And this was Monday. And I said, "Well, couldn't you pretend that it was Tuesday, even though it's Monday?" And she said, "All right, okay, put them in there." It was the small room on the side. And then I'm standing there in this small room surrounded by these inferior thick creatures that I have made, and trying to figure out whether I should just flee or whether it'd be better to just stand there in this loneliness. And before I could make up my mind, she was back, and she said, "Well, what are these?" And I said, "These are my works." And oh God, I'm drop dead, you know. And it's a very bad idea, lady. And then she started saying, "Well, you're showing them to me too fast. I'm trying to get out of there." And then she said, "Well, I can't give you a show until May." And I said, "I don't want a show."
You really came for her to look at the work.
I wanted her. I just wanted to see if there was anything that I was doing that related at all to the energy in her gallery. Because I was obsessed by seeing all those works. So I had a show in May.
In the summer of 1948, you were still a student at Black Mountain College, and then came soon after that to New York, and are credited with being an enormous influence, in fact, a major conditioner of neo-Dada among the young artists of the New York school. And I can recall a sculpture of about 2 or 3 years ago that is an homage to Duchamp as well. How heavily does he figure as an influence in your life, in your work?
I guess heavily, but later than he could be an organic, a direct influence. I mean, the first Duchamp that I ever saw was the bicycle wheel on the stool. And I saw that at the same time that I saw a sculpture by Maillot.
Where did you see that?
And there was no, in the Museum of Modern Art. And there was absolutely no problem. There was something in there by the Japanese...
Noguchi?
Noguchi.
You knew
And so
Duchamp in that
Noguchi,
period.
Duchamp, and Maillot. And I didn't see any disparity there. There was no conflict. But I didn't know him until much later.
Leo, you knew Duchamp in that period, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Let me see. When did I meet him first? Yeah, it must have been right after I got back from the war.
Before you ever started an art gallery, Leo, how
Yes.
did that ever come about? Your first gallery?
After being in Romania for a few years, where I worked in an insurance company first, and then I did work in a bank after that. And then that bank sent me to Paris, where they had a branch. So I was there at the bank and dissatisfied as ever. And I had a friend who was a decorator who designed furniture. At that time, it was in the 30s, the furniture he designed was art, what we call now Art Deco. So one day, going by Place Vendôme, many of you must know where Place Vendôme is in Paris, we saw a storefront that was, where there was a sign that the store behind that front was for rent. And to apply at the Ritz, which was next door, to find out what the conditions would be. So the friend of mine and I, who hadn't done anything in art until then, went in and asked how much it would be to have that space. Oh, first we wanted to see the space, of course. We wanted to see the space, and then we asked how much it would be to rent. And so the space was just incredibly beautiful. One room after the other, all covered in velvet, you know, soft colors, chartreuse and all that. And there were about, it was a succession of 5 marvelous rooms, something like 15 feet high, and there were windows on one side on the gardens of the Ritz. It couldn't be more beautiful. And so it turned out that the rent was very, very modest for the first 3 years. They wanted to give us a chance to make good, and then, of course, they were going to increase it very stiffly. That friend of mine and myself were very naive, very young, and immediately we were taken over by the surrealists. You see, I had a friend from way back who was from Trieste, like myself, and she was called Leonore Fini. Maybe a few of you know about her. Yeah. And she, well, when she found out that I had this marvelous space, she said, all right, now let's see what we do with this. And she, Max Ernst, Chellichev, Dali, and many others, Meret Oppenheim, who did the Fur Cup, well, decided that we had to do something very, very grand. And they designed all kinds of things, panels, furniture, and my friend did some furniture too, but that looked awful next to theirs, which was so much more imaginative.
You designed furniture?
No, Leonore Fini.
My friend, the one, you know. And then we opened this thing in May 1939 with an enormous bang. It was a great event. Yeah.
Well, when did you two get together?
At the first show at Betty Parsons, which was in May. And then we had, I had together with
Twerkov.
With Twerkov, with Franz Klein, with de Kooning, with Pollock and all those, we did a great show together called the 9th Street Show. And that was in May 51, right after he opened that show at Betty Parsons. That
Was he in the show?
That
Off and on.
we had something like 90 artists in the show in a band.
And each artist who came in would rehang the show.
Yeah, that was
That's
very
what I
fun.
mean.
more
off
things
and on.
change.
I mean, really, off and on.
So anyway, we had that show, and I was very disappointed. I must tell you about something. The other day, I came across that announcement that we made, that Franz Klein designed. It said 9th Street on top, and it was narrow and wide, and then there were all the names of the artists. And
I wasn't on it.
And you weren't on it.
I was disappointed too.
Because I'll tell you why. Because I saw your
You
show.
tell me why, I'll tell you why.
I'll tell you what. The show at Betty Parsons, I saw your work for the first time, and the catalog had already been printed, and you got into the show after the catalog was printed. That's why your name isn't there.
It has bothered him for 2 weeks.
Yes, I can.
It has.
Well,
Actually, another casual comment was taken very seriously. It was something that you said in 1963. In fact, it became a cornerstone of 1960s criticism. You were quoted by Alan Solomon in the catalog of your Jewish Museum show in 1963 as having said that painting relates to both art and life. Neither can be made. I try to act in that gap between the two.
I don't think any honest artist sets out to make art. You love art, you live art, you are art, you do art. But you're just doing something. You're doing what no one can stop you from doing. And so it doesn't have to be art.
You're saying that art rests...
And that is your life. But you also can't make life. And so there's something in between there that, because you flirt with the idea of that it is art.
Are you saying that art painting rests more in ideas than in the painting itself?
No, I think definition of art would have to be more simple-minded than that, and it's about how much use you can make of it. Because if you try to separate the two, art can be very self-conscious and a blinding fact. But life doesn't really need it. So it's also another blinding fact.
You've talked a moment ago about surfaces, and one of the things, at least to persons such as myself, that were so significant in what is often referred to as your, quote, iconoclastic approach to art, was to rid yourself of the tyranny of a four-edged, two-dimensional surface. And the first way, at least that I know of, that you did that was by making what came to be called combines. Can you tell us the evolution of that?
It was economy.
What do you mean?
Well, it was hard enough to get materials. Most of well, I had to have this feeling before I would accept it, because there are lots of other artists who wouldn't have done that. But I was embarrassed by during the abstract expressionist days of sort of some kind of self-pity, self-turning over, and remorse. And I was working out of, like art still is, like my major happiness. I mean, making it. Afterwards is something else. But I used the bed that you own.
The painting that you shared.
I didn't have anything to paint on.
And
it wasn't an idea.
I think what you're referring to is the image that you shared.
I painted on everything else.
On the cover.
If you've ever tried to collage down on a towel, put a collage on a towel, it's hard.